Hello, today's presentation, Right-Sizing Your PM Solution, a PMO for the Digital Enterprise. My name is Rich Weller, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Jamie Anderson, and we're going to take you on a little journey today. Probably the first thing that we should look at is the agenda or the path for our journey. If you're taking a look at the agenda, what you'll see is we'll just take a couple minutes and talk about us, and then we'll give you a few bullet points about PCubed, and then we'll go into a little bit more about this presentation that we're going to deliver. We'll take a look at what is a PM solution. We'll look at right-sizing the various components of a PM solution. We're going to look at a scenario and talk about taking an online quiz. Jamie, I don't think we'll actually do an online quiz today, but we'll talk about it. And then we'll talk about right-sizing the technology for your PM solution, and we'll see what kind of questions come up from there. So the next slide, just real quickly, again, my name is Rich Weller. I've been working for a number of years helping organizations get a little bit better at project management, and in that quest, the first objective is to understand where that organization is at in order to implement the right size PM solution. MBA, PMP, certified in project and project server, and yada yada yada. There's a few other things in there, but Jamie, how about a little introduction?
All right, so you guys may know me as your resource or marketing manager, but pre-taking on this stint, I have 17 years with PCubed, and I was a consultant in the field in the manufacturing practice, and that's where Rich and I started working together. I have a PMP and I have my PHR, and I definitely have a passion for project management. So where this came from, Rich walked down the hall on one of his recent engagements and basically said, hey Jamie, I haven't come across this before, I had an idea, and that just started this presentation. We really love, bouncing ideas off of each other and wanted to share that with you guys. All right.
So just a few bullets about PCubed, established in 1994, over 1,200 consultants around the world, global organization, actually the largest project management focused consulting organization in the world. And probably the last thing I would draw your attention to on this slide is we are a gold certified Microsoft partner, and not just for like the last 2 or 3 years, but for 12 years running now. So we've been doing this kind of thing for quite some time.
So this pitch is for a PMI presentation that we're doing tonight. You guys don't need to know this, and hopefully you knew everything that was on that about PCubed slide because you've paid attention to your onboarding and your service line overview.
So some more details or a little bit of details about this presentation that we're going to walk through. The key takeaways that we think you'll get out of this this presentation is number one, we're going to highlight some of the latest industry trends and how that's impacting our project or our project management roles. We'll understand the various levers of, that it takes to right-size your project management solution. And then we'll take a look and examine how you would right-size your project management solution for your particular organization. And then we'll take a peek or a glance at a few different online project management applications so you can get an understanding of what's available out there.
All right, so we launch into the digital PMO. So I wanted to open it up with what does it mean to be digital, and that's really different for different organizations. So I went out and did some research, and really a lot of this comes from raising your digital quotient with McKinsey. That digital quotient buzzword might raise some bells with you guys, and that's because we had published an article on that a couple years ago with one of our previous PCubed consultants. And so the 5 drivers that they focus on there is a data-driven decision-making, a focus on customer needs, so that's really connectivity, personalization, social media. It includes a focus on business process automation, and what drove it home for me is in the Detroit area. That's where we're giving the presentation. You might remember Quicken Loans, and they basically they launched their Rocket Mortgage in December 2015, and that improved mortgage application times from 1 week down to 8 minutes, and that's really a time.com article that references that in 8 minutes. That's one example of going digital and using business process automation to improve your customer expectation or your customer needs. The second one, hopefully everybody's heard of Disney, and so in 2014 they launched their FastPass Plus application, and what that actually allowed them to do was increase the number of people in their parks by 3,000 on a busy day, and that's by basically giving their customers access to that information to say, where are my longest lines, so where should I go that has a short line, to basically streamline. So those are both digital applications or scenarios for me. The last two items are two-speed IT. I hope people have heard of this with a lot of John Sheffield's talk on agile and bimodal that you guys would have referenced. And then that last one is that rise of agile. So on this one, hope you guys get access to Google Trends. This was something that Rich introduced me to last week, and that was a lot of fun, just throwing different keywords out there. It's google.com/trends. And you basically just go and take a look. You could see that over the past 5 years, PM is on a decline. And then if you put in agile as another term to compare against, you can see that agile over the past 5 years has been on a rise. So the other thing that we noticed is that it's moved past those early adopters. So Gartner always references that hype cycle, and that's where these people that are early at trying things out may try and see how that does, what are the best practices, does it really deliver the benefits, and now agile is on mainstream. So what does this mean for the PMO? Earlier this year I attended a session on PPM in 2020, and this was with Gartner analyst Michael Hanford, and he basically laid out that IT is being seized by the business. CIOs don't think that their people have the right skills to carry them forward to the digital age. He also gave some metrics that we're going to share with PMI, and we shared with MPUG. 60% of IT leaders will be replaced by business leads, and 70% of IT PMOs will be downsized. And so that's pretty scary. That really got everybody over to the ledge when we were going to the Gartner conference, and they were rushing to say, how do we cross-train our organizations? What does this mean to be bimodal? And really what we wanted to do is say, he laid it out. So today, what is the focus for PMOs? Our focus is on that traditional approach. It's on ticking the box on checklists. It's focused on best practices, institutionalizing those best practices and making them spread out across the organization. And really by 2020, we want to focus and move that over as a PMO to the strategic or the business value. And for us at PCubed, everybody knows that it's not a one-size-fits-all type approach. We never take stuff from the PCubed portal and just dump it out on our client site. We always have it fit for their organization. And so the last point was this is a continuous enhancement mode. So this may not seem as such a jump for some of us at PCubed, but this really was a jump for our customers at Gartner. And this is also a cultural mindset change. And so one of our key phrases at PCubed is speed to value. You'll see that a lot in some of the marketing materials. Value, I think you understand why we're including that. And on speed, I think we can all relate to why we need to get things done quickly. We need to provide that agility in the PMO to meet the needs of our stakeholders in this digital environment. And this is something that resonated for the CSC team. Like everything had to be done ASAP. So they go from basically no priorities to I want everything by Friday, and how do you maximize that? And so in this last trend that I wanted to showcase was this move to a project entrepreneur. And I liked that the approach they had in a Project Times article. They basically said that we needed to move from a project manager to a project entrepreneur, a mindset drawn to opportunities, innovation, and new value creation. Somebody that from the previous slide knows that one size does not fit all, and we may have to cobble together solutions. A little bit of this, a little bit of that hybrid approach. Finally, one who has the ability to take calculated risks, knows that things will continue to change on a dime, and will use that to courageously pursue success. So I thought that was really cool. So now, gotten everybody hyped up on how, you know, your job is going to go away today in your PMO if you don't change, and we're going to see how this new call to action that we have in this digital environment has an effect on our solutions going forward.
So with that said, the next question that we might ask is, well, what is a project management solution? And again, over my past and working with individuals and organizations, I always tend to say that a solution involves not only the people, but the processes as well as the tools, and that's what I say when it comes to words. But actually, within PCubed, it's a little bit bigger than that. There's a number of additional components. So with that said, there's actually 5 different components that we kind of analyze or we assess when we're working with organizations to try to find that right-sized solution. And so the 5 components are here on the screen. 1 is organization, 2, people, process, governance, and then tools. So what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of take each one of these and do a little deep dive into each one of these components and look at how you might right-size that component based upon the levers that are involved. So the first component is the organization, and when you're thinking about your organization, what you're saying is, well, am I attempting to implement this solution within a project, within one project, or are we trying to implement our solution within a program, or is it even bigger than that? Is it the enterprise portfolio that you're looking to insert your project management solution? And in addition to the size, we also would want to take a look at the drivers. Is your industry currently, or your organization or industry, kind of in a growth mode where you're looking to you know, hit the market, again, kind of back to that speed to value, get moving quickly, get your products out there quickly? Or are you kind of in a cost-cutting mode where you're looking at you know, trimming those costs within the organization and ensuring that you're you know, working on those right projects? So that's the organization component and the levers. And the next component,
really quick. So what we wanted to do was overlay what it means in a digital environment. And so some of you might see these trends, especially if you're in our San Francisco hub. So in Detroit, we're focused mainly on automotive, and we've actually seen many organizations moving to incubators or centers of excellence out on the West Coast. So one of these came from a Forbes article. Jaguar Land Rover sets up an incubator. And really, we want to just reference back to our project entrepreneur and the startup mentality. Is there a way, when you're right-sizing your solution for the organization, that you could maybe take some of those best practices that they've got for the incubator and leverage those within your own PMO? Or what other influences does this have, these size and drivers on your organization solution?
Great, thanks, Jamie. And the next component that we would want to assess would be the people component. And when we're talking about people, what we're trying to understand is, do you have an org chart in place where there's perhaps lots of structure? Do you have roles and responsibilities well defined and documented? That would be kind of like the traditional approach. And as you can see, this screenshot is coming directly from the project management body of knowledge, the 2013 version. And so that's what we may say is, you know, structured and multi-layered. The other side of the coin is more of a flat organization where you have self-directed teams in place where everyone's kind of at the same level. We just roll up our sleeves, and everyone kind of knows each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we have the ability to kind of just get in there, work together, and get the job done. Jamie, is there anything more that you'd like to extrapolate on the the self-directed teams?
Why, thanks, Rich. So one of the other things that we saw at Gartner that people were talking about, I mentioned before, the upskilling of the IT for the business. Also, conversely, you've got the rise of the data scientist. I loved it seeing an email from a client who said, do you have a data scientist? And if you have to ask me what this is, the answer is no. So taking the data analytics and building out new roles with that. And then multiple certifications. So if you've got a one-size-fits-all approach, you maybe don't need or you do need to have more than one skill set, more than one certification. And we're going to get into that on this next slide.
So the next slide is process, and this is the next component that we would assess when we're talking about right-sizing our project management solution. And from this picture, hopefully you're able to understand the direction that we're going here. What we want to talk about on this side is the waterfall or traditional methodology versus the agile approach. And the next picture that we've got on here just is again kind of a couple of pictures to depict the differences in those two approaches. The picture on the left, as you can see, a number of different bullets on that list actually came from a real engagement with PCubed, in which we had many deliverables called out. Project management deliverables, if you will, that we had to produce for the organization contractually, and we went in as part of that engagement. We did produce all these things, but what we found out after the fact, because they didn't really engage with us to do an assessment to right size, they just said, come do these things for us. What we found out after the fact was this really wasn't the way they worked. They worked from more of an agile, and Jamie, you already kind of alluded to CSC and how we work to right size things within that organization. And so again, a real world case study where we were asked to follow a certain approach or a certain kind of process, and then as we moved forward, we realized and they were more of an agile organization. And the next picture that I'll toss up kind of shows a marathoner and a sprinter, and this picture may be a little tough to decipher what we're trying to say here, but what we're really trying to say represent is the bimodal or hybrid approach. I believe another example that was used in the past was the spade versus the shovel, and it's the same concept that there is a time and a place for either tool or either approach, and quite often those two approaches need to exist within the same organization. And as time is moving forward, that's what we're discovering, is that organizations, companies, need to be able to adapt or apply either approach, either the waterfall or the agile, and that's really where this bimodal or hybrid concept is coming into play, and it's really proving out in the real world to be the right way, if you will. The next slide that we talk about is around governance, and there's a couple of different pieces that we look at when we're trying to right-size the governance. And the first one is with the life cycle, and what you're doing here is you're saying, well, are we trying to implement a life cycle for the portfolio or for a program, or is it at the project level? And if we're talking about at the project level, then we say, well, is this for the traditional approach or traditional / waterfall, or is it more for an agile approach, where it's, or I should say, iterative approach, as we're depicting there in the bottom picture. The other thing that you would need to assess when you're talking about governance is the strategy and escalation process. In other words, how do you go about taking the strategic direction from management and pushing that down to the various layers or levels in the organization to provide them that direction? And then also, how do you escalate issues or report current status of the project? How do you take that information from the lower level to the project level and roll that up to the powers that be to make them aware of where things are? So these are kind of the two pieces, I should say, of the governance components that you need to understand where you're currently at to help you right-size your project management solution.
So one thing on there, as you're trying to scale back and forth between direction and agility, one of the things that we're seeing is this new buzzword called adaptive governance. And this is really more about flexibility, whatever it takes to get the job done. But what Rich was alluding to before on the process, saying that you could have an organization that is both, maybe like in PCubed, not necessarily for external audiences tonight, but basically we have one engagement in Australia where the organization is heavily focused on Prince 2. They have one rather large program that's about 60% of their portfolio spend, which is run on Agile. And so that actually needs to be integrated back up into the Prince 2 gateways. So really need this adaptive governance cycle. And then in another PCubed engagement in the UK, thank you, John, for the information, 60% of their projects will be run on Agile with a minimum amount of reporting back up the chain. So what the teams have done is they've basically taken this scaled portfolio assessment approach that you've seen on Navigator and you've heard in some of the showcases, and they've used that to try and understand some of these environmental and other factors leading back into that recommended roadmap. So the one key point that John wanted us to make here is really understanding through these roadmaps or these assessments that you're going to have different political camps that are going to win out. And that's where really this adaptive governance or our new digital enterprise comes in. Sorry, watch Star Trek this weekend. But you're going to have to be aware of this political environment that's going to say whether it's going to be more of a traditional or an agile approach, and that somebody, i.e. the PMO, needs to be the pragmatist, identifying those solutions to move between the two camps, as we've traditionally done, and making sure that you're moving that needle forward.
So the next component that we'll talk about is the tools component. And I just want to quiz you for just a moment and say, well, what is a project management tool? And I'll pause here for just a moment so that if you're watching this video, you'll have an opportunity to answer that question in your mind. Again, what is a project management tool? And so with that pause, I suppose you've got something in your mind, and I suspect that maybe some people watching this video will say, oh, Microsoft Project or Project Server or Jira. Well, actually, I kind of toss those items into the technology bin, and if we come back and we say, well, what is a project management tool? If you flip to the next slide now, Jamie, what we've got here is a whole list of things, action item log, meeting agenda, burn down charts. These are those tools, tools that we as project manager have in our arsenal to help us plan and manage a project. So these are the different tools, as project management tools as I see them. But really, when you're attempting to right-size your project management solution, what you need to look at is a number, or consider as a number of different things. You need to look at quantity. So how many of those tools do you really need? Is it none of them? You really don't need any of them, or do you need all of them, or somewhere in between for your organization? And then looking across the board within the organization, how consistently are they used or applied? Again, you could be on one side of the scale while they're not consistently used at all, or on the other side is they're very consistently used. And then the next consideration is around the format. Well, what's the format of the tool and or the tool that you're talking about? And the example that I'll speak to is from a schedule perspective. Well, maybe there is no schedule for the project, or maybe it's kind of a bulleted list within an email, or maybe it's even written down on a napkin somewhere. Or you could go up to, well, we contain our schedules, they're all built and managed within Microsoft Project. Or you could go clear to the right side of the spectrum, which is, well, we have an enterprise project management solution in place like Microsoft Project Server or Project Online, where we house our schedules. So that's an example of what I mean by what's the format. Location, again, location is another consideration. Is everything, are the project managers storing everything local, or to the other side of the spectrum are they stored in a cloud somewhere, OneDrive, Google Drive, or maybe even SharePoint. And then the final consideration is around accessibility. Who needs to get to these tools? Is it simply an internal team, or do this tools or this knowledge, this information, does it also need to be shared with someone who is external to the project or to the organization? So these are the different considerations that you would need to take into account when you're trying to right-size your project management solution. But there's one more thing, and probably in today's digital world, it's probably the most important, and that is around mobility. And what we're saying here is you need to make the tools and the information available anywhere, anytime, and on any device. And so with all that said, kind of giving you all of the background and all of the different components of a project management solution, what we wanted to do now is kind of take you on a little bit of a journey. We wanted to provide you with a scenario, and the scenario that we've got is you can see on the screen here. You've just been asked to help a company improve their project management solution, and you know that in order to implement the right size solution, you must first understand their current that organization's current landscape. So with that said, let me introduce you to the Thirst organization. So the Thirst organization, it'll be a bit long-winded here, but I will, since we're recording this. I'll read this slide. The Thirst Beverage Corporation was founded in 2004 and produces organic-based soft drinks and juices sold in North America. They have about 1,500 people, employees, and revenues for 2015 were $20.4 million. Your primary sponsor is the CEO, and she has contacted you because, just here's the bulleted list, more and more projects in her organization keep coming in either late or over budget. And she wants to make sure that her company is focusing on the best projects for them. She has no real idea of the exact number of projects. She thinks it's somewhere between 50 and 100. There is a PMO in place, and it's been in place for a number of years, and they kind of seem to be just like the process and document police. I'm not sure they have, from what she's saying, they maybe not have a real high, great reputation for being too helpful. But there are many detailed project management processes in place and are required. And there are many, a great number of project management deliverables that are required for each project. The CEO gets she does get a status report monthly, but it's in PowerPoint, and her concern is, well, when she gets it, she's immediately questioning whether the data is real time, or I shouldn't say real time, I should say accurate. She kind of feels that it's a bit obsolete. Roles and responsibilities do exist for project managers, but it's from experience, and it's generally the heroic efforts of a few key individuals that only with those heroic efforts are projects getting complete. There is a project life cycle in place, and they do have an IT staff, but it's very small. And there is no enterprise project management information in place. They're currently just using Excel, PowerPoint, and Microsoft Project, but they do have SharePoint in their organization as well. So this, again, I know I was a bit long-winded, but this is kind of an overview of the Thirst organization. And what we would like to do now is kind of, if we could move to the next slide, Jamie, what we've got, again, and we're looking at this scenario, we're attempting to understand where is this organization currently. And so the next slide that we've got here is our organizational framework, and this is actually comes out of one of the PCubed's intellectual properties. It's from our organization PM capability assessment tool. Jamie, you and I have actually used this tool on a number of engagements in the past. I think you and I've been 2 or 3, and I think I've used it or had it with me on like 4 or 5 engagements to help us understand where the organization is at currently with respect to their project management maturity level. And so how this works, you can see down the left side, there are the 5 different components, and across the top there are different levels 1 through 5, and those are basically the capability levels or the maturity levels. And this model, this matrix, was built with input from PMI's OPM3 as well as CMMI, and so those components are factored in here. And so again, you can pause the video if you like, and you can review the details of this slide, but really what we were wanting you to do was just take a moment and with your mind's eye kind of say, well, with respect to organization, this Thirst Corporation would fall here, and with respect to people, they would be at this level. So pause the video for just a moment, go through, kind of maybe jot it down on a piece of paper, and get your take on where you feel the Thirst organization is at with respect to each one of these levels. And so with that said, I'll assume now you've started the video back up, and so perhaps what you've got is a scoring or a rating system similar to this, and this is just an example of how we would work with this, how we would use this, and again, what you're trying to do is to determine where the organization is at currently.
So when we get to tonight's session, we basically refresh back on the overview. They had all printouts, which you guys don't have because you're running this off of your computer. And then we gave them a quiz via Poll Everywhere. And so we were circling back around what's the different organization levels with them, remembering that you're trying to assess the organization, coming up with a right-size solution based on size and drivers. For people, it was multi-layered versus flat. In process, you're going back and forth between that pendulum swing between creativity and control. In governance, it was direction and agility. And then on tools, it was between none and many. And I'm not sure that I put the picture in here, Rich, but I remember you talking with Dan about when you got on CSE, we had the picture shown in there under the one slide on Waterfall where you had the 48 deliverables.
Right.
And when he got to his client, which can't be named externally, Uber, they came up with a blank sheet. So they would like no tools put in place, or as few as possible. So when we get to the actual optimization, we want to get you back to always thinking about that speed to value in this digital world. So that's really what you're optimizing on. We are right sizing. The other thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, and same thing with the PMI crowd, is every time you go into the OPM3 from PMI, it's always talking about the improvement on the maturity, your improvement goals, your process improvement roadmap, and it's not necessarily for us as project managers anymore about improvement, saying how do I get somebody from a level 2 to a level 3 in the maturity. It's more about making sure that we're driving that value. So the other thing that we had in the conversation last week with Don Sheffield is what they've come up with in one of the UK-based programs out of our new bimodal is that you're going to have 3 different parts of value. So I'm going to completely screw this up, but I'm going to encourage you to go out there and take a look at the materials that we have that have been created by John Allen and some of the guys on the various programs over there. The first one is business value. Second is solution value, and third is program value. And so you're taking a look at each of those different contributions through maybe your sprints into the program value, summing it up to the next level in Agile, delivering solution value, and finally you won't even realize business value until these features are made available to the real internal or external customers. So making sure that when you're coming up with your right size solution and focusing on speed to value, that you're actually optimizing that speed based on when the business will see results, okay? So long-winded, but that's where we're at.
Good stuff and good story. Hopefully everyone's been able to track along with the story we've been telling. And what we come up to now is the technology, and want to talk a little bit about technology. So you may say, well, why did we save the technology piece for here? And I'll answer that question simply because from my experience, in order to kind of right-size the technology for the organization, you kind of need to know the answers to all of the, where the organization sits on all of those other components. And so, again, from my experience, and I'll come back now and I'll bring in those different levels here that were across the top of the capability matrix, and again, these are moving bottom to top. These are going up the maturity scale, and but I'll be quiet. I'll be honest. I never can remember these exact words. So in my simple vocabulary, I always just use the phrase crawl, walk, run, sprint, and bolt. And people, as soon as I say that crawl, walk, run, sprint, people are like, oh yeah, I get it. I understand. You can't actually walk before you crawl, and you can't actually run before you know how to walk. So that makes sense. And that same is true with respect to maturing your organization or looking at putting the right size technology in. But one question you may have is, well, Rich, what is bolt? Well, bolt's pretty easy. There is only one Mr. Hussein Bolt, and that's who we have here at the top of the pinnacle. A little joke there, but moving forward, Microsoft, again, just a quick reminder, PCubed is a gold partner with Microsoft, and actually Microsoft has acquired a couple pieces of technology over the last year or so. And now they have, in my mind, what you may say a full suite of products that kind of map to those various various maturity levels, if you will, of managing work across that scale. And the first one that I'll talk about is one called Wunderlist, and it's you can see here again we've got another matrix where we're talking about who would this really apply to, and what is its complexity. Wunderlist, it actually works. I maybe too well. I used it with my son over the summer, and it was okay for a day or two, and then he realized I was micromanaging him too tightly, and he said, Dad, that's enough of that. So we stopped that. But the technology is there. The product works just great. You'll have to maybe check that out. The next product that Microsoft has acquired is called Planner. It's actually available free through Office 365. I should mention also Wunderlist is free just as a downloadable app. Planner through Office 365. We actually used Planner a little bit as we were preparing for this presentation or these presentations, and it's again an app that is available. The thing that's neat about Planner is it's integrated for each project that you create. You actually get a SharePoint site that's associated with it, and it's very, I guess, in my mind, Microsoft probably purchased Planner to compete with Trello and some of those other applications that are similar to that. And Jamie, you may have some experience there.
So I just wanted to interject really quickly and let you guys know that when we were coming up with Google Trends, or when we were looking at that before, when you type in project management, Google will tell you related queries. And basically Trello and Asana are number 1 and 2 on there as breakout searches for 2016. So that tells you the popularity of those two tools. I've used Trello for managing social media with the MIGSO team. So populating the cards on there, and it works very much like the agile approach where you can put things in order, and then using Asana with some of the San Francisco or New York teams, and also with the marketing team. So whenever you have distributed teams, that works out very nicely. You can integrate Asana directly with Planner. So Microsoft is trying to claw back some of that market share on the technology,
Sure.
And trying to get people integrated back over to Planner.
Yep. So the next piece of technology going up the ladder, if you will, is Microsoft Project. And for those of you that are pretty savvy, you may call me out here and say, "Wait, Rich, Project isn't really on any device." And I say, "Well, actually," and we've got a few screenshots that we could share with you. Actually, if you tuck SharePoint in between your project client, all of a sudden it is now anywhere, anytime, on any device, putting SharePoint in between there. So that's Project, and then moving up to the top of the scale is Project Server. Now, this is where things again get a little bit noisy or somewhat confusing. Microsoft, there's actually in two brands or two flavors of Project Server. One is the on-premise, and that's what we've, in PCubed have been working with, and we're kind of experts at for years, is helping organizations install Project Server on their hardware. And basically that's what the on-premise is the organization purchases their own hardware, purchases the software, and then they own it. The latest and greatest is that Microsoft has come out with is Project Online, and that's Microsoft hosting the Project Server on their equipment, and it's already up and running. And so here again, speed to value. In the past, or I should say even today, to get Project on-premise set up, that could take some time set up, to have that set up and everything in place. With Project Online, you can seriously have that in place within minutes, simply by cracking out your checkbook and paying that fee. But again, that's I see Microsoft as responding to the needs of the world, and becoming more agile and being able to provide you that speed to value. Now, the one question that the one question that you may have here, again, been doing this for a while, is you would say, well, okay, well, how do I know if I'm right-sizing I think I need Project Server, and I'm trying to decide between the on-premise and online. This is part of that right-sizing. Here's some tips on how you go about making that decision. So, Jamie, if you go to the next slide, again, we're talking about Project Server. Do I need Project Online, or should I go with on-premise? So to make that decision, there's really two different factors, and the first one is all around reporting. How, in your current organization, take a look at the reports. How robust are they? How many are they? Are they very complex? And if they're not, what I would lean towards is the Project Online. With the Project Online, you actually get a free, just kind of enable add-on, which is the Office 365 portfolio dashboard. It can be, kind of configured online, and then also the Power BI reporting, which is basically pivot tables on steroids. If you can do pivot tables, you can do Power BI. Those two pieces, reporting solutions, tools, applications, you can get with the Project Online. Now, if you needed more complex reporting, and I'm tossing the SSRS reporting up there, the SQL Server reporting services, or if you need some jQuery or JavaScript reporting, in that approach, that may kind of push you to leveraging the on-premise approach. The other, so reporting is one aspect that you would look at to help you decide Project Online or on-premise. The other aspect to that, in my mind, and for our little first scenario, it was mentioned that they had a very small IT staff, and so this again is a perfect reason to go with the Project Online, so you don't need you don't need to burden your people with additional servers or applications that they have to install and manage. So that's in a nutshell the the insight as to how to right-size technology for your organization.
All right, so to wrap up and close this with a summary, we're taking one of the slides that John had put together and put out with the agile and bimodal approach. So our opportunity, the PMO for the digital enterprise, you basically have one strategy for the organization. You have 2 modes of operation and 3 subcultures, so waterfall, agile, and then finally the PMO. So what is that? We brought you to that ledge earlier. Gartner suggested that by 2020, 70% of the IT PMOs would be rehomed. So this is really your opportunity. This is our call to action, that if you're not already there, you're part of the final frontier or the next frontier in that digital enterprise. Basically, as the PMO, we have the responsibility to set the language for the 2 subcultures. And really the word that they're using here is interlock, so that translator and facilitator of the 2 different work streams to get them connected together. You might have seen this in GM. I think you guys were the interlock between 2 different areas. So this is a traditional model that PCubed has played. We're just trying to teach you a few of the couple other buzzwords and how we've translated this to the bimodal approach. Where the operating mode is an organizational wall design, you're basically going to need to govern and report on 2 different portfolios. So think about that governance, that adaptive governance. Do you have Prince or PMI stage gates that you need to report up into with an agile set of programs, or do you have an agile set stage gate? So, and basically we're just trying to say that we're the owner of that organizational maturity model. We're the owner of right-sizing solutions to get to that speed to value. So this is pretty much the closing. We would open it up to conversation. The reason that we focused a little bit more on this presentation on the actual technology is we used it for an MPUG presentation last week. We're using it for Microsoft presentations coming up. So we will have this available with slides if anybody else wants to reuse, and you can always come back to Rich or myself, Jamie Anderson, if you have any other questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.